a good few people. There's a man on the front row that said he would. I'm going to give him a chocolate. And I'm going to give you a chocolate as well. That's right. There's usually a high proportion, especially in a technical crowd, that will just rip it open and start playing with it. How many people would pull out the instruction book and read the instruction book from beginning to end beforehand? Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong at all. What I'm trying to show is we have different styles. Okay, so the learning cycle here says input, action, and reflection. The people that like to read the book are input-orientated people. They want to take some input before they engage in the action. When they've done the action, if the digital video recorder works as expected, they think, that's good, I'll do something else. But if it doesn't, they go back to the book. And so they reflect a little bit. The key things with the learning cycle is the three components are there, and you can start anywhere. In fact, you have to start at the best place for your audience. So, if you were starting to talk to a group of technical people, rather than bore them, you might actually give them something to do first, okay? And then after you've given them something to do, then you can tell them what's going on, and after they've reflected on what's going on, give them the input. So the keys are, everybody has a preference. And the difficulty is that as geeks or technical people, what we tend to do is run to our own preference, rather than think about the preference of the audience. So what I'm suggesting is we need to think about that. And we said audience members will have their own preferences. You must complete all three for full learning to take place. In other words, you've got to have input, action, and reflection. Okay, so the presentation was titled, Why Nerds Aren't Heard. And so what I want to move on to is what I call GPS, Geek Presentation Sabotage. This is where geeks either destroy, damage, or otherwise obstruct their own presentations. They don't mean to. They're well-meaning. They want to give a great presentation. But sadly, because they're geeks, they let things get in their way. Here's the first problem. Too technically focused. They come in and they just go straight into the technical stuff. And let me let you into a little secret. People really don't care how much you know. It's true, isn't it? They just don't. Until they know how much you care about them. And that is what it's all about. That's why you're establishing rapport with an audience. That's why you're connecting with an audience and building a channel with them, because they will understand how much you care about them. And then, using that connection, you can unload some of the relevant, note the word relevant, some of the relevant things that you know to them. So everybody in your audience is tuned into this one radio station, using an Americanism here, WEITERE. In other words, what's in it for me? You know, when anybody watches a presentation, they're not tuned into you, they're tuned into what's in it for them, and rightly so. And so you need to cater for that. So here's my example, here's my idea, thinking about the technical level. Whatever technical level you feel you should be at for a presentation, come up at least one level. Maybe even 2 levels, because you will then take more of the audience with you on your journey. Yes, there will be people that want more information. They can ask. They can say, look, I know you've given us a block diagram, but what's happening in that box there? And you know enough about it that you can explain that. But what you've not done is you've not bored to death the people that were at the higher level. So come up at least one technical level. Here's the next one. No proper planning. The FBI 6 Ps are up there. Proper planning prevents particularly poor performance. That's actually a cleaned up version. You can see the real version on the internet. And so the idea is to consider your content and structure. I already talked to you about the beginning, the middle, and the end. I also talked to you about firsts and lasts to capitalize on the beginning and the end, primacy and recency. I talked to you about links with what you already know, repetition. Oh, I'm repeating something about repetition. Sort of encapsulated there, isn't it? And the outstanding stuff. So think about getting a great structure in there. Here's the next one. I'm afraid we can all put our hands up, can't we, and say we're all guilty of this. If we're asked to do a presentation, we all do get a little bit last minute. What I want you to imagine for a moment is that you're on trial. You've got to go to court because you've been charged with something you didn't do. I'm not saying it's a sexual thing, no, just in general, okay? You've been charged with something that you shouldn't have done. You're innocent, but you need to defend yourself. And so you employ the most expensive attorney or lawyer you can find. And so you ring up the lawyer and say, like, when can I come over so I can go through all the details of the case with you so that you can defend me properly, because it's very important. And he says, actually, I find the best times are when I wing it. You know, I don't need to know anything about it, really. I'll just come, I'll say what I feel, and it'll be all right. You wouldn't be very pleased, would you? You get the point I'm making, don't you? If you're going to deliver a presentation, you need to get everything, all of your research done, and get it all done well on time. So when is the ideal time to start a presentation? It's now. It's not next week or next month or 2 days before when you've got to give it. It's now. Get on with it. Failure to prepare is to prepare for failure. And if a presentation is worth giving, it's worth giving badly. I'll come on to that in a moment with practice. So, many dimensions to good preparation. It's not just preparing your slides. It might be going to see the room that you're going to present in to find out whether it can be darkened, whether the projector is strong enough, whether your PC or laptop connects to the projector, all manner of different things. Knowing your audience, there are many, many different ways of preparing. So, walk in your audience's shoes. Think about the experience they're going to have and try and cater for that. Actually, this reminds me of some great advice I once heard from a guy called Jack Handy, who was somebody on an American TV show called Saturday Night Live. And what he said, if you're going to criticize somebody, you should really walk a mile in their shoes first. Because then, when you do criticize them, you'll be a mile away and have their shoes. I think you'll agree with me. It's very good advice indeed. Next thing, beta trial. In the world of software and lean and agile methodologies, we are encouraged to test things. In other words, give a presentation in presentation context before you're actually really giving it to your target audiences. Amateurs practice until they get it right, but professionals practice until they can't get it wrong. And we saw an example of this last year. Lovely Laura from Sipgate gave a presentation at a place in England that was deemed one of the best presentations. And that's because she had put a lot of work into practicing it and giving it all of the attention it needed. And it really paid dividends. It gave great results. Now, think about footballers. They practice all week just for an hour and a half on a Saturday. Actors practice all week just to do the Saturday evening performance. So, when you're giving a presentation, practice, 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 and practice again. Practice out loud. Practice to a real-life audience, or if not, to your iPhone or whatever. Can anybody give me a good advantage of practicing your presentation? Just name one. There are many. Yes, sir? Immediate feedback. Yeah, if you're practicing to a real-life audience, good. I like that one. Let's just pretend you're practicing into your iPhone because you couldn't find a real... Yes, ma'am? It's going to help with nerves, for sure, absolutely. And just building on that point, I'm going to give you 2 chocolates. And just building on that point, if you've practiced the beginning of your presentation more than the rest, and you come out and you feel a little bit nervous, if you've practiced it a lot, you can go onto autopilot and deliver it through your nerves to the place where you're feeling happier. So yes, it will definitely help reduce nerves. Oh. Okay, I wanted an advantage of practicing without an audience, so into your iPhone. Can anybody? Yes, sir?
Practicing the speed of talking.
Yes, you've hit on the one I was looking for there. You know how long it's going to take. You know, if it's a 20-minute presentation, you know whether you're running at 15 minutes or at 25 minutes, and you can hear your own speed of delivery because, thank you, sir, what we tend to do when we're a little bit nervous is we tend to go a bit faster through the presentation. Gives the audience the message that you don't really want to be here because you can't wait to finish and go home. So, best to listen to yourself. A little bit like driving a car. You know when you first learn to drive a car, a manual car, when you change gear, you swerve a little bit, don't you? Because you can't really focus on the steering and the gear change and everything else. But, in the end, you become totally unconscious of driving a car. So it is with presentations. The more you give, the more you can listen to yourself, deliver the presentation, and actively change the pace, the pitch, the power, and the speed of what you're saying. Great point, sir. So, practice out loud. Very, very important. Now, this is a terrible thing that geeks do. They try to deliver a presentation without involving the... Did you say audience, sir? You did. Well done, that. Well done, that man. Did anybody else say audience? Somebody else said audience over there. When I do this in America, I have to tell people at the beginning that I don't accept any liabilities and I don't want any case actions or class actions for injury by chocolate. Yes, they attempt to leave out the audience, which is a terrible thing to do because participation is totally key to engage people. As I said before, people don't want things done to them. They want things done with them in a friendly way. And so you must employ participation. It can take many forms. It's not just asking people to show their hands, although that's very valid. I actually went to a presentation some weeks ago when the guy started off by saying, if you believe in telekinesis, raise my hand. and I was sat near the front of the audience and he went, David, stop that. I thought that was quite clever. Anyway, questions are very important forms of participation. You can do the show of hands as well. And involvement in demonstrations, getting people to tell their stories or talk about how they experienced using lean or agile methodology or whatever it might be. And then sharing stories of where they've come from, what they've done. All of these are very, very useful things. So, even as a separate exercise, nothing to do with slides, nothing to do with purpose, nothing to do with practicing, brainstorm participation methods. When you're thinking about your presentation, just get a piece of paper and say, right, how can I involve my audience in this presentation? Could it be by asking a question at the very beginning? Could it be by asking for a show of hands? Could it be by finding out whether people have got any experience in this subject and then bringing them into the presentation to contribute their experience? Because that will have an amazing effect. Of course, on the flip side of the coin of engaging people is failing to engage them. Apathy. I'm sure we've all been there. We've delivered presentations, we've looked into the audience, and we can see that not everybody is totally engaged in the presentation. They may be looking at their phones. They might be looking at each other and telling each other stories about other terrible presentations they've been in. You know, you don't know what it might be, but you've really got to jump in and grab them. And so we've got to have some enthusiasm. And the reason I underline the IASM is it's very important to remember that the IASM in enthusiasm stands for I'm sold myself. In other words, I'm doing something that I can get enthusiastic about. So if your boss asks you to deliver a presentation and it's not something you're particularly interested in, you could actually say to your boss, I don't think I'm the best person to do this. You know, I'm not going to be able to generate the levels of enthusiasm that it would be good for somebody to have to deliver this presentation. You should actively push back in a constructive way, not in a belligerent way. But this is something to bear in mind because audiences find that attitudes are catching. So if you get out there and you're not enthusiastic about your subject, how can you expect your audience to be enthusiastic? Have you ever been in a presentation like this where somebody comes out and says, well, I've come to talk to you about the new workflow, and hopefully, by the end of this, you'll know what to do. Now, imagine if you were looking at a newspaper and the headline screamed, this article is really boring. Would you bother reading the next part? Of course you wouldn't. And presenters do this all the time. They manage expectations down to floor level. So you've got to be enthusiastic about what you're doing. Deal with your nerves as well, because if you feel uneasy, your audience will feel uneasy as well. And there's things that we can do about that. In order to actually engage people more, though, as I already mentioned, you can use your voice. You can use pitch, pace, and pauses, yeah? You saw what was going on there. I'm going to give you a chocolate for seeing what was going on. I could actually see it in his face. He was thinking that guy's going to pause. And I did. Okay, so the idea I want to give you here is check yourself. Think about how you're feeling about this presentation and get in the right mood or the right mode. And then the last one here is failure to follow up. People deliver presentations and then they don't check whether the required learning was achieved. And it's not just about the happy sheet, score 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 at the end of a session. Those things are important. However, if there was a sponsor that asked you to do a presentation, I would really like to think that he had a good reason for asking you to do it. So wouldn't it be great to go back to him after a couple of weeks and say, you know that presentation I did a couple of weeks ago, did that achieve what we wanted it to achieve? And in fact, actually, here's the learning contract that we all signed at the beginning that said the audience were going to be able to do this or know that or whatever it was. Did we achieve those things?